Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. Actually, I'm your lone host today. My name is Greg Huss. And today, like I said, it's just me today. It's just me for the podcast. I decided to go live. So, you guys listening on podcast form, just a heads up that this is a live episode. So, just like all the recordings that we do over on YouTube, you should be able to listen to this podcast and not have to view it, not have to see what I'm looking like as I'm talking about all these prospects. Everything I do, any questions that we get, I'll be providing those questions out loud so you can hear the questions and hear my responses. But yeah, today is just me covering Cubs minor league action as always. But the reason why I'm solo today is because typically I would be joined by either Brian Smith or Greg Zumak, but those guys are both busy today, which is totally fine. But typically what I would do in response to that is invite somebody else to come on with me, whether that is one of the minor league broadcasters or if it is one of the national writers like R.M. Layton that we have on the show who does a great job, or Brendan Miller, to get the kind of perspective from the major league stance of things. So typically we would get somebody else on the show, but today it's kind of a weird circumstance, right? Where we're just coming off the very first full weekend of all four minor league affiliates. And I wanted to really focus on recapping the action and seeing what happened this past week. So if I brought on Aram, we'd kind of get a view of only the top prospects in the organization to a certain degree. If I brought on Alex Cohen, we'd only talk about the Iowa Cubs for the most part. And I wanted to recap the entire organization because this is what we've been waiting for, right? This is what we've been waiting for all offseason. We've had an offseason full of podcast episodes where we've been covering prospect rankings. We've been covering just little news and notes here. We've been doing interviews and stuff like that. But like really why we're here is to sit down and talk about the Cubs organization and what they're doing in the game. So that's what we're going to do today. I've got notes. I watched as much of the games as possible over the past week or so. The Tennessee Smokies, South Bend Cubs, and Myrtle Beach Pelicans, they played on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I'm recording this on Monday night. I'm live with you guys on Monday night. I've got people already in the comments here, which is terrific. What I'm going to do today is kind of go run through some of the action, probably kind of formed by affiliate. I'll start with Iowa, work my way down to Myrtle Beach. But I'm going to be all over the place a little bit. So bear with me whether you're on video, live, after the fact, or if you're listening on podcast platforms. Bear with me because I'm going to be all over the place talking about a lot of different players today, filling up probably close to a full hour of that. And I'll be addressing questions also. Questions that come in the chat, I'll be addressing those. And I don't expect you guys to follow the suit of Iowa, Tennessee, then South Bend, then Myrtle Beach. I'll be kind of answering those as they come in. And I think that was probably the best way to start off. I do have a question in here from Michael Eddy before I get into kind of the notes that I have laid out for this episode. Michael asked, which affiliate do I think will have the best record? I think that the AA team has the advantage early, but with Cade and Shaw likely not being there for long, can AAA catch up? Yeah, I think that you nailed it. I think that the AA, the Tennessee Smokies, are the team to watch right now in the Cubs system. That's the team to watch. I mean, I think that in terms of the depth of their team, the rotation is solid now. The bullpen is tremendous. The infield is great. The outfield has some studs too. Tennessee is the team to watch right now for sure. Iowa's no slouch either. We talked about it on the podcast where we previewed the Iowa Cubs season with Alex. This is the most prospect-laden team at the Iowa Cubs level that we've seen in years and years and years. So that's going to be a super fun team to watch. They might end up having the best record of all the teams. But I think that right now I would put my money that Tennessee is the team with the best record by the end of the year. South Bend is also super fun. Myrtle Beach is going to be an interesting watch all year long. I don't necessarily think they'll have a good record by the end of the year, but they're going to be entertaining to see who kind of breaks out from that bunch of players down in single A down in Myrtle Beach. So that's worth keeping an eye on. So I'm going to get into more of these questions because these are terrific. I've been promoting the heck out of going live here for this episode, and really I needed to go live. I think to have you guys listening in, so I didn't just feel like I was looking at a computer screen and only talking to myself and going off of my notes. Being guided by your guys' questions is going to be terrific in this episode, and I will absolutely do that. So I do want to start with Iowa here. I think that PCA it should always be the topic of discussion first, and we are going to talk about PCA first. I think that right off the bat, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but now that we do have news, PCA was removed from the game in AAA Iowa on Sunday. After 2 at bats, he came out of the game. There was a lot of uproar as to why he might have come out of the game. Was it a trade? Was it a call up? Was it an injury? Was it just some other reason? What was the deal? We didn't hear on Sunday. We didn't hear what the deal was with that. But I believe it was Tommy Birch at the Des Moines Register that came out on Monday morning and said that it was a little arm injury, problems that he had from diving out in the outfield. There's no reason to get concerned yet about PCA. It could have been something that he just needed to come out that game, and he'll be back in the lineup come Tuesday evening. So we might see him back in the lineup. We might not. I don't know. I just don't. I don't want to speak too much. It's really, really difficult talking about injuries in the minor league system. So if you guys have tuned in to Cubs on Deck or the previous version of the show, Growing Cubs, years ago, we try really, really hard not to talk about player injuries, because we just, like you see at the major league level, you find out immediately after what the heck is going on with these players, right? Like we knew what Justin Steele is being tested for with his hamstring before we even had the results. We don't find out what a guy's being tested for. We don't find out if he's been injured at all, let alone the results of any tests from a guy in the minor league. So it's really tough to come on this podcast and talk about that topic. But it's worth pointing out that PCA did go down with an injury. Worth keeping an eye on that situation and how it has implications for his development in AAA this year. I did want to talk about PCA in general, though, and kind of the show he's been putting on in AAA Iowa in terms of the base paths specifically, right? We're seeing the full-blown Pete Crow Armstrong experience down in AAA this past week on the base paths. He had a situation where he ended up getting in a rundown between third and home and ended up scoring on a steal of home. We saw him also get in a rundown between first and second, and a pretty long one at that, where he ended up, it seemed like 6 guys were in the infield between first and second base trying to corral Pete Crow Armstrong. They ended up not being able to do it. He slid into second base safe. So that base running aggressiveness is something that over the offseason, how we kind of hinted at the fact that, like, let's not get carried away by 14 plate appearances from PCA and the results that he got at the plate. There were people out there that were concerned about his base running at the major league level. And I think that, like, there's legitimacy to that. He is a very good base runner. He is an ultra aggressive base runner. So he's super fast. He's super good, but he's also super, super aggressive. And so in the same way that we saw the guy he was traded for, Javier Baez, get into some trouble on the base paths, where Joe Madden always came out and said, hey, we're not going to tame Javier Baez. We don't want to limit that aggressiveness. We don't want to teach the aggressiveness out of him. I feel like we have the exact same situation with PCA. He will learn when he can be aggressive and when he should not be aggressive. But I don't want, like, Craig Counsell or Marty Peavy or anybody else managing him to necessarily say, hey, like, cool it, because then he's not going to be making smart base running moves either. Like, part of that aggressiveness is what makes him so good. So we are going to see Pete Crow Armstrong get out on the bases, whether in AAA. He'll get out on the bases more in the major league level, because the players are better that he's going up against at the major league level. So we are going to see that. I'd say just ride the wave, guys. Like, just ride the wave. Enjoy what you're seeing from Pete Crow Armstrong on the base paths, while also understanding you're going to see some mistakes. You're going to see him struggle on the base paths a little bit too. So worth keeping an eye on, worth paying attention to, because it's a blast. So let's go back and check out a question, since I've kind of addressed something on my notes. Let's go to a question. We do have Rich Biesterfeld in the chat, which is terrific. We got Alex on the chat as well. We also have a comment here from Alex saying, how do we feel about Luis Rujano in extended spring training? Yeah, that's a good point. So Luis Rujano, if you listen to this podcast in the past, Luis Rujano is one of those guys that I kind of had my eye out to break out this year in starting off in Myrtle Beach and hopefully getting up to South Bend at some point this year. And so it was kind of strange to see him start off. He's in extended spring training. He's down in Mesa. Technically, he's on the development list. There's about 9 or 10 guys throughout the organization that are on the development list. The thing with Luis Rujano, which makes it unique, is a lot of the other guys on the development list are kind of org guys, right? They're in AAA. We see Joe Hudson is on the on the development list. And then like we got Bradley Beasley. I think AAA is littered, but I think they have like 5 different guys. Bradley Beasley, Felix Stevens. We have a couple other guys that are notable. They're just organization type guys that are on the development list. And you see a lot of that early on in the season. Towards the middle of the season is when you start seeing like guys innings being limited or like working on specific things with prospects. Early on in the season, it's kind of weird to see Luis Rojano on the development list. And so I don't know what to make of him. I think that I'm not too worried. I don't think he's close to being released or anything like that. But I think it's interesting what they might be working with him specifically. They're probably working with him on something very specific before they ultimately call him back up to Myrtle Beach and have him ready to go. We know that the Myrtle Beach pitching rotation, we call it pitching rotation, but like it's really just a bunch of dudes that are going to go like 3 innings at a time. We talked about that I think on last week's show, but like it's a bunch of dudes that just like throw some innings. And so when Luis Rojano is ready, however the Cubs define that as being, he will be up in Myrtle Beach, if not in South Bend. So I do think it's peculiar, I guess, that Luis Rojano is on the dev list and down in Mesa. But I'm not, and he is down in Mesa. He's on the dev list for Myrtle Beach, but he's down in Mesa. So I'm not concerned about it. It's just an interesting kind of concept. So Rich Beasterfeld's comments that Scott McKeon is also on the dev list. That was the other guy I was thinking of. Thank you, Rich. So while we're on the topic of Iowa, actually, so we have a question here from Bricks Behind the Ivy. It's also a Chicago Cubs podcast, asking, with the Julian Merriweather injury, who is the next man up for the bullpen from Iowa? Does Palencia stick based on K potential? I think Daniel Palencia probably sticks because he's the best reliever of the bunch down in AAA now at the major league level. We saw Danny P go three strong innings closing out the game on Sunday for the major league team. I think that like we're constantly looking at like next man up in AAA Iowa, and looking at that roster. This was actually a topic that I wanted to get into today because the way that Marty Peavy and crew is using their bullpen in AAA Iowa is super interesting. So we saw early in the season, and then earlier in this past week that Riley Martin was being used as the closer, and in high leverage spots. Without much success there. But then later in this past week, he was kind of moved out of high leverage, was Riley Martin, and he killed it. I think ended up being 6 Ks in 3 innings or something like that. Was really, really strong was Riley Martin for AAA Iowa. So he's kind of on that short list. The thing with him is like I don't know that he's the next guy up necessarily. We did see Riley Thompson, the other Riley in AAA Iowa, kind of do the opposite of Riley Martin. I'm going to struggle with these names here, guys. Riley Thompson did the opposite of Riley Martin, where Thompson was starting off the season in the bullpen, which was good to see. I was really happy that the Cubs were using him in the bullpen, not in the rotation, which I was worried about that. But he was not in high leverage. Well, come to the end of this week, and he was used as a closer. He locked down a save. It might have been the first save of his career in the pros. But Riley Thompson looked like a different guy. I think both Riley Martin and Riley Thompson, their stuff doesn't look tremendous, but I like some of the results they're getting. I like that Riley Martin was striking dudes out like he did last year. I like that Riley Thompson, on his save opportunity, I believe that was on Saturday. On Saturday, he had a save opportunity. The velo was ramped up a little bit for Riley Thompson. So he was in his lower leverage spots. Riley Thompson was in the low 90s with his fastball. On Saturday, in a save opportunity, he was right there in the mid 90s, like 93 to 95 with his fastball, which was terrific. And I thought Riley Thompson just like looked different in that closing spot. I thought that he looked amped up. I thought that he had the swagger on the mound, which was terrific. I really like Riley Thompson in the bullpen. Now the stuff I know that Brian Smith over the 1060 West Discord channel was talking about the pure stuff from Riley Thompson. The fastball isn't quite there. The stuff isn't just like, it isn't premier bullpen stuff, but it's hard to argue with the results to a certain degree. And he was definitely getting them out of the bullpen. So those are a couple of guys to look out for. I think that like if we're talking about guys in Iowa that might be the next man up, I think some of those veteran players, that's always an easy answer to go with. I think you got Richard Lovelady there, Edwin Escobar is there, Colton Brewer, Sam McWilliams. Sam McWilliams has looked very good. I know he's not technically a prospect, so I won't go into too much detail on him. But Sam McWilliams has looked terrific, 97-98 with the fastball, getting really good results. Another guy is Keegan Thompson. We know Keegan Thompson is there. And then Carl Edwards is now on the Iowa Cubs roster. So that's a guy to look out for as well to be called back up after he signed a minor league deal. So there are plenty of options that I think could occupy a back end, not a back end of the bullpen, but a last spot of the Chicago bullpen. I think there's plenty of dudes in Iowa that can hold that role down pretty easily. Even Cam Sanders, I think, has looked pretty good in flashes. He had a bummer of an outing, I think, on Sunday this past weekend. But he's looked pretty good. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good options, and really anybody from that Iowa bullpen can be called up as the last man in the Chicago bullpen. I'd be like, you know what, that's fine. I'm totally fine with that kind of outcome. So let's go to another question here. We have we have a question about we do have a question about Matt Shaw. We'll get into Tennessee here in a bit. That's from Michael Eddy. Let's look at see if I have any more comments here. Owen Casey has still stayed terrific. He looks very, very good. He did have an outing on Tuesday where he had a 3 strikeout game. Those are going to happen, man. Like the strikeout rate is one to watch, and he has been limiting that strikeout rate more than in the past. But 3 strikeout games are going to come, and it's good. Like it would scare me if like he came out and like just absolutely tore it up and had like a sub 20% strikeout rate and was like amazing. I mean, like what the hell's going on? Like is this legit? So I want to see some growing pains out of Owen Casey, and I think we saw those a little bit this past week. He's still been terrific, and he's played some right field, played some left field. That's always fun. Another kind of guy that I want to keep an eye on that was not very good this first week of the first full week of the season was BJ Murray. So he really struggled. I don't know what his line looks like right now, but he really struggled for at least the first week of the season. BJ Murray is, we talked about it. I think I talked with Cole Roeder on the show here. That BJ is the most like even keel human being that you're going to see, most even keel like baseball player and human being. And so I'm not too awful concerned with BJ Murray's start in terms of like that really hurting him long term. Like I don't think him struggling for 3 weeks out the gate is going to be like torpedo him down to a really awful season. So if there's any guy that like I'm not worried about his really cool start, it's BJ Murray. It's worth keeping an eye on, like because I talked pretty extensively about BJ Murray being a guy that like he relies on having a little bit more power and a guy that relies on like drawing enough walks. And if AAA pitchers and then eventually major league hitters aren't worried about his ability to like take them yard, they're going to be more aggressive. The walk rate's going to drop, the power rate won't increase. And it's something to keep an eye on. I'm not worried about him bouncing back at all, but it's just it's what we're seeing is the start of like what I was really worried about. But again, not time to overreact. None of these positives or negative. That's the big thing with this, right? Anything I'm talking about today, we shouldn't be up in arms about like, oh, like, do we not believe in BJ Murray anymore? No, that's not what I'm saying. Do I think that Owen Casey should be in Chicago right now? Also not what I'm saying. So it's still just a week of games, and for the lower levels, it's literally 3 days worth of games. I'm just kind of recapping the weekend that we saw and the strong performances. So I'm still welcome to take some questions about the Iowa Cubs roster and the results, but let's get into some of the teams that we saw for the very first time this week. Starting with Tennessee. So I said we did have a question about Matt Shaw. Let's start off with that because, like we started off with PCA at the AAA level, we got to start off with Matt Shaw at the AA level. Michael Eddy asked about Matt Shaw: is it too high or too low? Horner's contact and plate discipline, Hap's power, 30 doubles and 20 homers, and speed, average to above average. All right, okay. So he's asking, is it, I guess, the expectations of Matt Shaw? Can we expect Horner's contact and plate discipline abilities at the major league level, Hap's power, which is 30 doubles, 40 doubles, 20 home runs, stuff like that, and then above average third base defense? That's asking a lot, I think. I hope that that's what we see from him. Like that's the framework that you can start from, I believe, right? Like if you're starting from like picturing him as a Nico Horner type contact ability, picturing him as a Ian Happ type power ability, and then picturing him as having hopefully above average defense at third base, like that's a good like framework. But if he lands all of those things, like he is, I mean, if he does all those things, he's like like close to MVP like discussion, right? If he's an above average third baseman on defense, he's hitting at a 300 clip, and he's striking out sub like 10%, and then hitting 20 plus homers a year. Like that's incredible. So like we should not expect that from Matt Shaw. Grant, like, now with that being said, like the show that he put on this weekend, having a home run in his very first at bat. I was actually out to dinner. I came back to the news that Matt Shaw, and I obviously watched the clip over and over again, that Matt Shaw had home run in his first at bat. He's somebody we should get super excited about. Now, putting very specific like expectations on him as far as like results produced, maybe that what Michael and I just described there, a combination of Nico and Hap and above average third base, like maybe that's like what we picture as like a 2-year peak at age 27, right? I don't know, like 27 and 28. We shouldn't expect him to do that at the major league level, like in 2025 through 2020 or like 2035. That's not what we should expect. But that's a good framework, right? Like I think if you take Nico Horner's contact and like drop it down a little bit, take Ian Happ's power, drop it down a little bit. I think you take below average defense at third base. Like if the bat plays, he doesn't need to be above average defense at third base. I mean, like you look at Chris Morel. We're having that conversation with Christopher Morel right now, where it's like he's so valuable in offense. Like you're not even asking for an average defender at third base. But yeah, what Matt Shaw just did this weekend got us all excited all over again. He was obviously out of the lineup on Friday on opening day. Didn't get word back onto why that was, but he did show up in a game and home, like I said, homered in his first at bat on Saturday. So that was super, super fun. All right, we have some more questions. Let me go to my notes here. Some other guys that I wanted to talk about specifically about the Tennessee roster. I think we got to talk about the bullpen because that was one of the more exciting groups that we had talked about last week on the pod, and then when we covered the preview of the Tennessee Smokies with Mick Gillespie, like super excited about that Tennessee bullpen, and it has showed up in a big way between Porter Hodge, Jake Reindl, Michael Arias. We got some really strong performances across the board with the bullpen. And I want to specifically call out Porter Hodge and Jake Reindl because when they showed up and they played on Friday night in the first game of the year, they immediately started showing off those sweepers. And I think that those two are probably the best sweepers in the entire organization. They are absolutely disgusting. Jake Reindl, honestly, I think thinking back about the sweeper, like how the sweeper has taken over the organization and the league as a whole, I think the first guy that like made me clock that, like, oh, like this sweeper is like a thing was probably Jake Reindl. I saw his a few years ago. And I was like, oh my God, like this is a tremendous, tremendous pitch. And then Porter Hodge started adopting that. That got him put on the 40-man roster. They both showcased that on Friday night, and it was beautiful. Those two pitches are major league, like really strong major league quality pitches that by themselves can get them up to the major leagues as long as they're healthy. So I want to point those guys out. Michael Arias is another guy I want to call out. Michael Arias in his game he threw on Saturday. He came in relief of Cole Franklin, who we'll get into for sure. Michael Arias was basically what we saw from him last year. And I mean that as a terrific, terrific compliment. That he came out. The changeup was very good. That just drops off the table. It drops off the table. It has some arm side run a little bit too. Really, really good. That's his best pitch by a long shot. It's one of the best pitches in the entire organization is Michael Arias' changeup. The fastball was really good. But I'll describe that as a pitch that like that's not enough to survive. Like I don't think that the fastball changeup combination is enough to survive as a reliever at the major league level. Like I could be proven wrong, especially now that like the splitter is kind of taken over. Who knows? But the fastball is very good. It's a very good pitch. Mid-90s fastball, plenty of arm side run on it. It's a really good offering. By itself, it's not enough to survive on its own, but that's okay because he does have the changeup. The last pitch that he was throwing that reminded me of what we saw from last year is a slider. He landed it probably twice, maybe 3 times in that outing on Saturday. And when he landed it, it looked tremendous. It was, I think he used it on a back foot pitch to a lefty hitter. And it was beautiful. It just kind of dropped off the table. It swept in back to his back foot, just like you like to see. Um, and it looked terrific. Unfortunately, it was only like 2 or 3 times that he landed that out of a whole bunch of times throwing it. So, um, the thing with Michael Arias is he's going to have to get that command with that slider. What he has to get his command better in general, but the slider to be a plus pitch, it can't just like flash good once every like 5 or 6 tries at it. He's got to like get that, like land that more often. And then we're talking about Michael Arias being a real stud, a real force in the Cubs bullpen this year. So really liked what I saw from Arias, but it's worth like keeping an eye on. Just watch that slide. That slider is what you should continue to watch and see how often he's landing it, because like that's what's going to make Michael Arias is that slider, because we know the changeup's really good. So just keep an eye on the slider for sure. All right. Let me see what we've got here. Brian is joining, I believe, still from vacation. Brian comments, joined the show late. Can I assume that you let off the show with a good 10 minutes of Chase Strumpf on Sunday? Yeah. I did not, Brian. But I'm glad you brought it up, so I can say that you brought it up and not me. Yeah, Chase Strumpf had a really strong outing on Sunday. He's up to 2 home runs on the year. The home run he hit on Sunday was to dead center field, a little bit right center, but basically dead center field over the wall out there in center. I don't know, dude. I don't know. Chase Strumpf, he is. The thing is, like, I'm not any more excited about Chase Strumpf than I was this time last year or the year before that. Like, we know what Chase Strumpf is. I'll keep repeating it forever. Like, we know what Chase Strumpf is. Like, it's very clear what he is. If he can get just a little bit better across the board, then like we're looking at a guy that like might force a way to a call up at some point like this season. But I will continue to tweet out the cheese man every time he does something well. So I'm glad you got to bring up Brian Chase Strumpf, so I didn't have to. So thank you for that. Let's see what else we got here. Let's see what else I have from Tennessee. I think that I'll try to keep churning through these. You guys keep sending in the questions into the chat. I appreciate that, because I will continue kind of addressing those throughout as I see them as I'm on the different affiliates, and I'll keep churning through these, and then I'll just address every single question that I have not addressed at the end as well. So I appreciate you guys taking part in the chat. I appreciate you guys that have tuned in. Like I said, if you guys missed the beginning part of the show, like it means a lot to be able to talk with other people that I can see interacting with the show. So it's fun. And hopefully this is coming across well on podcast forms. I don't think it's too awful different when you guys are listening the next day on podcast form. So a couple other, I said I was going to mention Cole Franklin and his strong outing on Saturday. He went 4 perfect innings on the mound. He looked strong, man. Like he looked really good. I still don't think, like, I don't think that Cole Franklin has plus offerings at all. But we're like, he has just a good mix of pitches, right? The fastball might be a little too straight, but he's got some velo on it. The changeup has always been really good. The curveball is good. The sliders, like he has a true 4-pitch mix. And we've just been waiting for Cole Franklin to break out. The fact that he did this and showed out with 4 perfect innings on the opening day on his first outing of the year was just a delight. Like it was so fun to watch that. Really, like my thing with Cole Franklin for this outing on Saturday was I thought that he did a really good job of being aggressive in the zone early and counts. He didn't fall behind too often. And when he did, Brian actually pointed this out again on the Discord, but when he did, I thought like he didn't really just like throw the at bat away, right? We know Cole Franklin, one of his problems over the past few years has been that like when something goes wrong, whether it's an at bat basis, if he gets behind 2-0 in the count, then it's like, all right, like let's just put him on base. Let's start fresh with the next batter. Or if it's like, all right, he gives up a few dunk hits, a few like swinging bunts and stuff like that. It's like, oh, this could really unravel. Well, when he got behind in counts on Saturday, like I thought he did a really good job of like bouncing back and getting back in the count and putting the hitter away. But also like he got in ahead of the count very often, I thought. Over the course of his entire outing, over the 4 innings, I counted only really just like 5, 6, 7, like not like a handful of pitches that you can kind of consider like throwaway pitches. And when they were throwaway pitches, like we saw last year with Cole Franklin, they were him kind of flying open and a fastball or a slider, whatever, or curveball kind of flying out to his arm side high into his arm side. Like, so if Cole Franklin's a righty throwing to a right-handed batter, it was like up towards the batter's head, right? That kind of view, because he would like pull off and open up. That only happened a few times. Like I said, only a handful of times from his outing on Saturday, and that consistency is going to be huge for Cole Franklin. If he can do if he can put together a month or two of those starts, it doesn't have to be every game being four perfect, obviously, but like if he can continue to show that consistency during his time in Tennessee, like he will be up in Iowa pretty soon. Because we know that like he's been around for a while. We know we've just been waiting on him to put it all together. And if he shows that he can consistently put it together, then like he's ready for the next challenge up in AAA Iowa. So definitely wanted to call out Cole because that was really impressive. I have a couple more notes on the Tennessee roster from what we saw on Sunday specifically. So that was the Jameson Tyone rehab outing on Sunday. Richard Gallardo was a guy that was slated to start that game, and he ended up still working the bulk. He ended up going, I think, 4 1/3, maybe, right around 4 innings for Richard Gallardo as well. He just continues to put up numbers, man. Like I didn't see. I thought that the curveball might have looked a little bit better than it did last year. Tough to say from just one outing. I didn't see like a stretch of like, oh, this pitch is significantly better. It might be. We'll have to wait and see. But like, he was getting a lot of weak contact in the infield and in the outfield. He's getting forcing a lot of weak contact, which is important for Richard Gallardo because he's not been a guy who's ever generated a lot of swing and miss, which is fine. He's still been in the organization a long time. He's forced his way up to Double-A Tennessee. Keep watching results for Richard Gallardo because that's going to be huge to see if he continues to do that. I mentioned the other bullpen guys, Hodge, Reindl, Michael Arias. Worth pointing out that Zach Lee still has really good stuff. A good breaking ball. It looked like a curveball that he was showing. In years past, it's been fastball slider almost entirely. It looked like he had a curveball going in that game on. I'll need to go back and look a little bit more in depth at comparing that to like last year in the breaking ball. But like I think he was flashing a curveball in that game on Sunday that he threw. Zach Lee looks like a big league arm. I know he's older, and I know that he was a weird didn't really put up good numbers during his time in college, but he was still drafted. And he's been really good every time. As long as he's been healthy in the Cubs organization, he's been really good. He's an older guy. It doesn't matter as much for relievers, right? He has that low release point. He has a fastball that rides up really well. He has a slider that I think is very, very good. And if he does have this curveball now, that's just another offering that he has to kind of showcase to get to the major league level. So Zach Lee, worth pointing out. Like I said, the bullpen was terrific in Tennessee all weekend. One more, or I guess two more things as far as Tennessee goes, right? One rough start, one fire start. The rough start is Kevin Alcantara. He got off to a really rough start in Tennessee. It's been a rough start to the season. He will bounce back. Remember the rough start that Kevin Alcantara got off to last year, right? Where the first, month and a half or so of the season was like really brutal. And he ended up putting together over the course of the season, a really strong body of work. So just 1 weekend worth of hitless games. I think he's still hitless. I'm not too worried about it, but it's worth pointing out. Like if we're recapping what happened this weekend in a small sample size, I can't go on without mentioning what Kevin Alcantara didn't do, I guess. On the other side of things, James Tarantos looked incredible. 4-hit game on Friday night in the first outing of the year. Ho-hum 4-hit game, right? He just continues to hit. He can make contact with just about anything. I tweeted out a picture of him making contact with a ball that I swear he almost had to jump for. Now, you don't want him swinging at balls over his eyes. Fair, whatever. His bat to ball ability is like something I've never seen before. Like it's tremendous. He looks bigger this year. I think James Tarantos does. So like that's worth keeping an eye on to see if the power comes out as well, because he's looking a little bit bigger. But like him being the leadoff hitter for Double-A Tennessee is tremendous. We'll see when he gets called up. We'll see how hot he stays, but that's worth keeping an eye on as well. So, okay. That's all I've got as far as notes from Tennessee. I'm at about the 35-minute mark of this episode. So let's look at a few of these questions. I didn't notice any specifically. Go ahead and send them in. If you guys have questions about anybody on the Tennessee Smokies roster, send those in, and I'll address those right away. We do have Christian comments and says, I don't see Shaw as a 30 home run guy. Um, yeah, I don't either. I think that again, though, it's fun to put expectations of craziness on some of these big players, these big time players. But like, you should never expect 30 home runs from Matt Shaw. If he gets there, that's awesome. We shouldn't expect that. Shaw is Dustin Pedroia. Yeah, I think that's another good like example of like the framework to start with, right? Like just look at a poor man's version of Dustin Pedroia, and like that would be great. Like Dustin Pedroia was an MVP. Dustin Pedroia was like amazing for years for the Boston Red Sox. So like, yeah, if you like use Dustin Pedroia as like a boilerplate of like this is what I want Matt Shaw to become, yeah, that's terrific. I love that. This question is not about Tennessee, which is totally fine. We have a question from Alex saying, Will Sanders and Jackson Wiggins were destined to go in the first round by this time last year. What are your thoughts on what their potential is going to be? I'm thinking they have number 2 potential. Yeah, so two tough guys to talk about because we haven't seen them live in action. We didn't see them live in action yet this weekend. Jackson Wiggins still down in Mesa, throwing off a mound, still continuing that rehab process. We'll see him at a full season affiliate later this year. Will Sanders is one of 2 starting pitchers in South Bend that we have not yet seen take the mound, which means you would think that we'll see Will Sanders in or no, sorry, hold on. Yeah, you'll think we'll see Will Sanders. Let me make sure. Was he one of 2 guys? Yeah, Will Sanders one of 2 guys. Him and Nick Hole were the only starting pitchers that didn't throw for South Bend this past weekend. So, in theory, we'll see Will Sanders take the mound either Tuesday or Wednesday of this week, which will be super super fun. Yeah, I mean, I think the dream scenario with Jackson Wiggins is that he is this year's version of Cade Horton. He won't be, but kind of again, if you're following an ideal situation, Jackson Wiggins is that you're following Cade Horton's ideal situation. Will Sanders is a little bit different. Where like I think that Will Sanders is like if you're following the expectations of let's say like Brandon Birdsell or Connor Nolan, they're different players. Like the way they go about getting outs is different. Will Sanders and Brandon Birdsell, but like how successful Brandon Birdsell was last year, if we can get that level of success from Will Sanders starting off in South Bend and maybe even finishing in Double A Tennessee, like that would be terrific. So like that's the expectations, not even the expectation, but that's the hope is that those 2 guys kind of follow those leads from a couple other college pitchers drafted the year prior. So keep an eye on those guys for sure. Yeah, here's a question about Double A Tennessee from Banks asking any early thoughts on Mo Baller's defense and framing. Yeah, so Moises got into 2 games behind the plate, I think, this weekend. Maybe it was just 1 game. It might have just been 1 game. I think Pablo Aliendo caught the other 2 games. He showed off a really strong performance in terms of being super athletic behind the plate. He pounced on like a swinging bunt in front of the plate and got the out at first base. That was terrific. Nothing has stood out for Moises Ballesteros and his defense and framing, and that is a compliment. Like that, like you want a catcher, in my opinion. Like you don't want a catcher to stand out because like it's kind of like an umpire, a good umpire. You don't ever call his name. If you're never calling Moises Ballesteros' name, it means he's doing something strong behind the plate in terms of like not letting balls get by him, not doing a bad job of throwing out runners, stuff like that. So nothing specifically stood out. I will say that catching defense in general, but catching defense is a really difficult thing to follow, even as much as minor league baseball as I watch, because a lot of the way that I watch, like I'm watching as many games as possible every night, but a lot of the way I consume these games, and you guys know if you've tuned into the show for a while, is by going back and I'll kind of identify a starting pitcher that I want to watch after the games have ended. I'll be like in bed at night, kind of scrolling through, and I'll go 10 seconds at a time and really watching a specific pitcher. So like this week, I went back and in addition to watching the games, I also went back at night and watched certain outings from Cole Franklin and Michael Arias and Colin Moreno and Tyler Schleifer that we'll get into soon. But and then I'm also watching the offensive production during those innings when a guy is on the mound. So defense is just tough because it happens all throughout the game and you never know when it's going to show up. You can't exactly go check the box score and say, oh, this guy made a defensive, a strong or a bad defensive play unless it shows up as an error or it shows up as like a put out. It's like, oh, I want to go see this put out. It might just be a super easy play. So like going back and watching defense is like, I will admit, like that's the toughest thing to judge for the minor league level. You can judge it based on athleticism, and you can judge it based on like uh, uh, appear like on plays that they make while you happen to be watching, right? I'll get into. I think actually now might be a good time to talk about Drew Bowser because we'll get into Myrtle Beach here in a second. But Drew Bowser at first base. From the time that I was watching Drew Bowser, I know he was drafted as a third baseman, right? And then he played third base in college. Drew Bowser has been playing first base, and we kind of expected that to happen after he was drafted, was to play first base for Myrtle Beach. I think he still has quite a bit of work to do in terms of like Hayden McGeary needing a whole lot of work to do at first base. Drew Bowser also has a lot of work to do at first base. And that was based on like what I saw. I might have missed some plays for sure, but like from what I saw from him this weekend, he's still got some work to do over at first base, as does Hayden McGeary, obviously. So just really tough. I was not thrown off in any way by Moises Ballesteros' defense. And like I said, I'm taking that as a good sign. So James Trianto's question from Christian A. Has James Triantos found a position yet? He's been playing second base this season so far for the AA Tennessee Smokies. James Triantos, like I think it would go a long way in terms of him getting a lot of time at second base. I know he's kind of floated around between second base and then third base and then second base again and some outfield in the Arizona Fall League. He's been all over the place, I know. But James Triantos getting a lot of work at second base probably brings his value up quite a bit to prove that he can be a second baseman. That's where he's been. I don't know that is his long-term position, but I think double A, or I think second base probably is his best bet of being an average defensive player at a lone position is second base. So keep an eye on that as well. Eduardo Nunez, we got a question from Nick Gelling. Eduardo Nunez, could he contribute in the Major League bullpen this year? He's part of that really, really strong group is Nunez in the bullpen in AA Tennessee. I think that he's a really good example of a guy that like could have a really strong couple months. And it's like, hey, let's take advantage of this really hot stretch of games from Eduardo Nunez and bring him up to the major leagues. Obviously, he's gonna get called up to AAA before that. But yeah, run down like I did with Iowa earlier in this episode. Look at the Iowa bullpen. Like I could see any of these guys fitting in the major leagues in that last spot in the bullpen. Look through the entire Tennessee bullpen. All those guys are guys that we can see up in Iowa like tomorrow. It won't happen, but like they're that skilled and that strong. Okay. Let's see what else we got. One more comment from Rich Biesterfeld. We were talking about Jackson Wiggins there. He did throw a live bullpen on Friday, did Jackson Wiggins. It was his second time throwing to hitters. So like he's getting closer. Like he's not like close. He's not like he's going to be up in Myrtle Beach this week, but like the fact that he's now throwing to hitters is terrific, terrific news for Jackson Wiggins. Okay. Let's move on. We're going to talk about some South Bend notes that I have from this past weekend. So, like with PCA and AAA and Matt Shaw and AA, we have to start off with those guys there. We have to start off with the performance that Jefferson Rojas put on opening night in South Bend for the South Bend Cubs on Friday. Wild, man. So Jefferson Rojas started off the game, but started his first plate appearance of the year, home run, first pitch, opposite field. Just like incredible piece of hitting to go opposite field and take that yard as a 19-year-old in South Bend in a cold outing is just like wild, dude. Like I can't believe that he did that. I was shocked. I loved it. I screen capped it. I posted on Twitter, all that good stuff. People loved it, but I don't want that to overshadow the game that he had overall in his first game of the year, right? So in addition to the home run, he just had a great game. He worked a full count walk, which was a very, very good at bat from a super young kid. He went first to third on a single when the ball was hit. It was a ground ball in front of him. He was at first base. Ground ball hit up the middle. I'm not sure if the center fielder or left fielder fielded it, but it was hit to like left center up the middle. And he went first to third on a ball in front of him. I thought that was terrific. He had a jumping web gym at shortstop. He made a really great leaping catch at shortstop. He did make an error in the ninth inning on a ground ball. Yeah, okay. Like if we're nitpicking, obviously you don't want to see him making errors, but like, okay. The rest of the game was tremendous from Jefferson Rojas. Worth pointing out that on Saturday and Sunday, not nearly as strong, the season long numbers over the course of 3 games are not tremendous. But really, what that performance that he put on Friday night, like I will remember that the entire year long. When we're looking back on like what were your favorite moments of the season, like I think that Jefferson Rojas putting on that performance on opening night is going to go down as like one of my favorite performances of the season. It was terrific. That same night on Friday night, Drew Gray. I think we had a Drew Gray question up above. Drew Gray was amazing. Vandy asked the question, or he just commented that Drew Gray is a dude. That fastball will play. Just has to refine the breakers, but I liked what I saw there too. We'll be comparing him and Ferris for a long time. Vandy nailed this. Yeah, dude. Drew Gray looked amazing on Friday night. I put a post out there that if it weren't for Michael Arias, Drew Gray would probably have the fastest arm action in the entire organization. Watch him throw a fastball, and it's like, holy crap, that thing gets up on you. And the whipping action on his arm is tremendous. So Drew Gray looked really strong. I agree with Vandy that he does need to refine the breakers. He showed flashes of being very good with the slider and the curveball, mostly slider is what I like to see. But yeah, he was just strong across the board. I really think that the cut ride on that fastball is like some pristine Chicago Cubs pitching development stuff. You know, that's what you're looking for. So yeah, comparing Jackson Ferris and Drew Gray probably gonna happen a lot because I've said it before. Like I think that the Cubs had a lot of confidence in moving on from Jackson Ferris, not just because of Drew Gray, but like partially because of Drew Gray, right? Like you can't discount the fact that they have a guy that's a lot like Jackson Ferris already in the organization, and Drew Gray, and really the reins are going to come off of Drew Gray a little bit this year as he's a year removed from Tommy John now. So yeah, I thought Drew Gray was, again, a terrific performance from him on Friday night. Rich points out that Drew Gray and Jackson Ferris were roommates at IMG Academy in high school, which is terrific. I knew they both went to IMG Academy. I knew they were both teammates. I did not know that Drew Gray and Jackson Ferris were actually roommates during their time at IMG Academy. So, like, if you want another reason to compare these two dudes with each other and watch their path to the major leagues over time, that's that's worth keeping an eye on. Alex asked, "Are you ready for the South Bend Cubs to come to Peoria in June?" Dude, I already got it on my calendar. Heck yeah, I'm really excited. I'll be over. I will surely be over in Peoria for as many of those games as humanly possible. You guys know I live not too far away from Peoria, so I can watch the South Bend Cubs take on the Peoria Chiefs. I'll be in action. Hopefully, I'm still getting to see some Jefferson Rojas action. I would love that as one of my favorite players in the organization. Let's keep running down the line as far as what we saw from South Bend this weekend. I want to point out the performance from Sam Armstrong. I know that some people were surprised, and I was surprised, but some people were surprised to see him in South Bend to start off the year. Sam Armstrong is kind of was coming into the season one of my sleeper picks to like be a really strong performer out of the bullpen. I was really happy to see him assigned to South Bend, and his outing on Saturday night looked really, really impressive. I guess Saturday afternoon or night. I forget which one that was. He was going to the slider basically whenever he wanted, right? He was throwing fastball slider for the most part. He was going to the slider a lot and getting a lot of swings and misses and getting a lot of looking strikes too. He was using the slider, was Sam Armstrong, to his arm side. So he was throwing as a right-handed pitcher. He was throwing to right-handed batters, and he was throwing the slider inside on right-handed batters, like front dooring these guys. And it was catching guys off guard. Now, it looked like he was trying to do that. To the batters, it looked like, why would you ever try to do that? He was getting them looking a lot with that slider. He was also using it to lefties, and he was also using it outside to righties. But what really caught my eye was his ability to throw a front door slider to some of these right-handed batters. The fastball was not nearly as strong as what I thought the slider was. I thought the slider was tremendous, the sweeper slider, whatever you want to call it. But that was a performance that caught my eye with Sam Armstrong. And then the last performance that I wanted to kind of point out for South Bend was what Tyler Schlafer did in his start on Sunday. Tyler Schlafer returned from the injured list. He was out with Tommy John surgery. He was out with arm surgery for the past year. if you think back to what we saw from Tyler Schlafer back in 2022, he was really kind of like the a sleeper pick at the back end of some top 30 prospect rankings for the Cubs. He was putting up pretty good numbers without spectacular stuff. It was the changeup that really stood out, but it was ability to kind of get outs and look like he was close. He was a young kid that was like getting close to like really kind of showing something, and then he went down with Tommy John. For Schlafer to return back in his first night back, and what he did on Sunday afternoon was really, really impressive. I thought he looked strong. I thought he looked solid. I thought he looked under control, which is like something that's impressive for a guy in his first outing back from Tommy John. So, not a whole lot of throwaway pitches. Some. The stuff didn't look tremendous. I didn't think the fastball was like popping 99. I didn't think the slider was tremendous. The changeup did look solid, like it always has. But really, he just continued to get outs. He looked really strong. Tyler Schlafer is a guy that if he can continue to string together outings like that, the stuff is probably going to play up as he gets older, obviously. And he's just a guy to keep an eye on. I really like Tyler Schlafer and what we saw in his return from Tommy John. So, all right. We've made it through my notes on 3 of the teams. You guys are still tuned in live, which is amazing. You guys are the best. I appreciate you guys all tuning in. Now's a good time to remind you guys, if you guys are watching on YouTube, whether it's live or recorded afterwards, to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. It really goes a long way as we continue to kind of build out the show, as we've hit the regular season, as we're going to continue to be producing these episodes once a week throughout the entire season. If you guys could like this, it goes a long way in kind of getting the word out. Again, we appreciate you guys tuned in on podcast form too, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on Apple Podcast, on iHeartRadio, all that good stuff. You guys' support is like insane. I can't thank you guys enough for always tuning in, whether it's a solo episode of just me and listening to me talk for an hour long, which is outrageous, or tuned in for me and Greg Zumak with a little bit of draft talk, or me and Brian Smith and all the great content that Brian brings to the table, or any of the broadcasters. Like I can't thank you guys enough for always tuning in. It's always tremendous. So thank you guys. All right. We got a question from Vandy asking about, we just talked about South Bend. I didn't mention Pedro Ramirez, so I'm glad that Vandy brought this up. Did Pedro Ramirez lose a lot of weight this offseason? He looks super slimmed down. Wonder if that helps him out defensively. Yeah, Vandy, you're killing the questions, dude. These are tremendous. Yeah, that's worth pointing out. And I'm glad you mentioned it because I did not have that on my list of topics. Pedro Ramirez does look pretty trimmed down now compared to where he was last year. Not that he was like a big dude, but like he didn't really shout projectability last year or the year before, did Pedro Ramirez. This year he looks thinned down. I think that it's going to play a little bit to his athleticism and kind of agility in the field. It doesn't hurt. I'll tell you that. It doesn't hurt. He already wasn't showing off a whole lot of power. I don't know how much of that was Myrtle Beach and how much of that is just his like smaller in terms of height-wise size and inability to kind of generate power. But it's worth keeping an eye on that pop. And if the him trimming down actually improves some of his power, if him getting out of Myrtle Beach improves his power, how that works in the field. Obviously, like we kind of had question marks about like, is he a second baseman? Is he a third baseman? It means a whole lot more if he's a second baseman, right? Like a third baseman needs to hit more. That's just how it works. So for him to be able to play a good defensive second base, which he actually hasn't been, he's playing defensive third base because Ed Howard's been at second. But yeah, all I'm saying is it doesn't hurt, man. It doesn't hurt that Pedro Ramirez has come out looking good, looking real good in terms of his physique. So shout out to Pedro Ramirez for the work that he put in. Yeah, so Alex also mentioned, speaking of guys' physique, Alex mentions, I've seen pictures of Moises Ballesteros slimmed down and gained some muscle, and it seems to me that he's catching more because of Hayden McGeary is manning first base in Tennessee. Yeah, so I agree with part of that. I think that Mo Baller does look slimmed down. He's still a big boy, man. Like he's going to be a big boy, but he has slimmed down a little bit. And I think that he's doing that because he needs to catch, right? It's important that he's a catcher. I don't think that he's catching more because of Hayden McGeary. I think he's catching more because he brings more value as a prospect and as a player if he's hitting more. I think that like Hayden McGeary has been at first base, and it's important for him to work on his defense at first base so he doesn't end up a DH. But I think it's also important that Moises Ballesteros works on his defense behind the plate so he doesn't end up a first baseman or a DH. So yeah, I don't think that Moises is back there because of Hayden, but I think both those things are super, super important. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to Myrtle Beach. What a interesting team in terms of like the unknowns of names. We had I can't shout out Sam Weiderhaft enough for our preview that we did of the Myrtle Beach Pelicans team. You guys go back and listen to that episode, the season preview of Myrtle Beach, because what Sam brought to the table was just, you can tell how much research that Sam does going into these podcasts. Like as a guest spot, like on this podcast, like he had done so much research. I know he was down in Mesa, so he got some feedback down there, but like he did a ton of research in these players for guys that we have not yet seen in Myrtle Beach until this weekend. So shout out to Sam. He was the best. Let's get into some of these players here. Okay. So let's just stick with the trend of like the name that might be most recognizable at each affiliate, and starting off with these guys. Christian Hernandez. We're so excited for Christian going into 2023. We were hopeful in 2024 coming into this year that he kind of proved that going back to Myrtle Beach, he kind of figured out the level and performed well. And man, he started off hot on both. I believe it was on both Friday and Saturday that he performed well. He's already stolen, I think, 4 bases in 3 games. We know that he's a super smart base runner. We know he can swipe a bag. We know he's shown flashes on defense as well. He's playing shortstop over his brother Alexis Hernandez. Alexis is at second base. Christian is at shortstop. That's worth keeping an eye on because, like, man, I like Christian Hernandez at shortstop. I don't think he's like I don't think he's as good as like Luis Vasquez over there short, obviously, but I think that it's important that he remains at shortstop. The hot start I think is super important. I think him getting off to this hot start for Christian Hernandez in Myrtle Beach was huge, because for him to come out and for him to start this weekend and this upcoming week and just get off to a rough start, like three hits in the first week and a half, that would be rough. That'd be tough, because it's like you're returning back to the place you were at last year, and it's like, here we go again. You could really easily get that vibe, but instead he came out, and it's like the difference in coming out strong and having that vibe is like, oh, and if I come out poorly, it's like a here we go again, versus if I come out strong and it's like, man, I can do this. Like, I've already seen this action. I can do this. He's still just 20 years old. If he can come out strong and put together a real strong first half of the season, like, yeah, he will of course be at South Bend later this year. And if he's at South Bend, then he can again take his lumps a little bit to a certain degree at South Bend. Say like, okay, let's figure out what I do well, what I do poorly at South Bend, so he can return next year back to South Bend and say, hey, I've already got to figure it out. I've already worked on this over the offseason. I'm coming back strong. So I was really impressed with Christian Hernandez this weekend. I was also impressed with Alexis Hernandez. I thought that he looked really good. He had a 4-hit night on Saturday. I think that 3 of them were infield hits, so that's worth keeping an eye on. But Alexis Hernandez, a year younger than his brother, he was terrific in the Arizona Complex League last year. Actually, Rich, perfect timing. Alexis was the best player in the ACL last year, says Rich Biesterfeld. It was a tough time on that team, I think, down there last year. But Alexis was very, very good, showing off the power. He's still a small guy. I think Christian and Alexis still have plenty of muscle to build out their frames. But I think both of them getting off the hot starts is just terrific, and it makes for really good content in Myrtle Beach. I love that. So, I believe I have, entering this year, Alexis Hernandez ranked 1 slot above Christian Hernandez. Just wait and see what they do this year in Myrtle Beach. Like, we just got to wait and see. There's so much action to see from those 2 guys. Other guys, speaking of Christian and Alexis Hernandez and their frame, I guess this is just an episode where we talk about guys frame and how they look. Christopher Pasiola came out, and he looked a lot like slider of frame than I expected Chris Pasiola to. Like I said, I'm seeing a lot of these guys in game action for the first time. I've obviously seen clips. I've heard rumblings. I've heard guys talk about certain players, but in terms of like seeing them in game action consistently, like seeing them at Myrtle Beach, I'm seeing them for the first time like you guys are. So Chris Pasiola is a smaller dude. He still has a lot of muscle to build out, and I think that like if he puts together a season like what we saw from Christian Hernandez last year, just like we shouldn't have freaked out about Christian, we shouldn't freak out about Chris Pasiola in any season he puts together this year. He puts together good at bats. We saw that this weekend. But I think he doesn't have like some true raw power yet, and I think he still has some strength to build over the course of the next couple seasons or so. So I wanted to point that out for sure. We do have, speaking of guys that are at the lower levels. I want to speak about. We have a question from Alex about Alphonsine Rosario, and he was my pick. I posted, we over at Northside Bound, we have our breakout players of the year, and Alphonsine Rosario was my pick to break out this year. Super good athletes, super good exit velos. I know RM Layton over at Just Baseball posted an article with some guys to kind of keep an eye on, guys that caught his eye during his time down in Arizona in spring training. And I think he had Alphonsine Rosario at like a 112 exit velocity, 110, 112 exit velocity. He came away really impressed with Rosario. That athleticism in the outfield, the really strong exit velos that he posts. So Alphonsine Rosario, I'm really excited to see him in Myrtle Beach. I assume that we see Rosario in Myrtle Beach later this year. That's going to be super, super exciting. All right. What other notes did I have from Myrtle Beach? We've just passed the hour mark, so I don't have much more here that I'm going to get into. But I want to talk about Alfredo Romero. The last guy I'm going to talk about is Jack Patterson. So spoiler alert, I'm going to go off on a tangent about Jack Patterson. So all right. Let's talk Alfredo Romero, because I really was impressed what we saw from Alfredo Romero. I was also impressed what we saw from Juan Bello on his start on Saturday, and Alfredo Romero on his start on Sunday. I think Romero, this entire rotation for Myrtle Beach is like, let's just find one or two guys that can break out a little bit this year. I think Alfredo Romero could be that guy. Tall, lanky dude. He looks like a young pitcher. The fastball looked really strong. The slider looked really strong. The command was a little all over the place, but really not too bad. The frame is there. He was out of the zone a little bit, but I don't think he was like missing huge. So Alfredo Romero is maybe not my pick to break out in Myrtle Beach this year, but like he's a guy to keep an eye on for sure. And it's a guy that, like, me and a lot of us did not know much about Alfredo Romero before we saw him throw on Sunday afternoon. So Alfredo Romero, Juan Bello, keep an eye on them. I know I've been saying that a lot this episode, but like that's kind of what we have to do after 3 games of the season, right? But let's continue to watch Alfredo Romero continue to develop and look better and better. So that's all I had on those, except for Jack Patterson. Like I said, I'm going to save Jack Patterson until the very last. I want to go back to the comments here and see if there are more comments that I need to address. Rich saying that Chris did put on some muscle over the offseason, which is terrific. I want to see him continue to do that. Vandy making a comment about, I'm super excited to watch the Myrtle Beach pitchers this season. I'm with you, dude. Initial thoughts on Juan Bello, who pitched on his birthday, Arian Rodriguez, and Alfredo Romero. Yeah, I kind of gave that a little bit. I think they're just very raw pitchers, which is fun. Like they're young, raw, athletic-looking pitchers that I think that, like, if the fastball continues to play, if the slider continues to have more command over that, like, keep an eye. I wouldn't mind all 3 of these guys: Juan Bello, Arian Rodriguez, and Alfredo Romero. Wouldn't mind all 3 of those guys sticking around in Myrtle Beach the entire year long, just getting it figured out a little bit. I'd love to see that. So let me go back to some more comments, see if there's anyone that I missed. If I missed anybody, I'm sorry, guys. It's really difficult looking at my notes and speaking about what I'm talking about here and following along with your comments, but I appreciate you guys sending them in. I think that looks like all of them. If you guys have more, go ahead and send them in now. But if not, I'll give you guys a couple seconds here. I don't want to have bad radio for the podcast. I'll give you guys a couple seconds. And if not, I get to go off about Jack Patterson, which is super, super fun. So, like I said, I'll remind you here, subscribe, like, comments. Really appreciate you guys communicating with us on the podcast. Check out the YouTube, check out our Instagram account, check us out on the podcasting platform, subscribe on those, give us a rating. We really appreciate all that stuff. So, looks like no more comments. So I get to talk Jack Patterson, which is what I really wanted to talk about this entire episode. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull up as I'm kind of talking about this. I'm gonna go off the cuff a little bit with Jack, but I also want to pull up the thread. I posted a thread on pretty much everywhere the other last night on Sunday night. I posted a thread on Twitter. I posted a thread on Threads. I posted a thread on, or I posted a long posting of this on the Facebook group for Cubs prospects. I posted, I believe I posted over on the Discord channel as well. But it's worth pointing out how incredibly easy it is to root for Jack Patterson. Um, he made his return to the mound on Sunday uh, after almost 5 full years away from full season affiliates. Right, so he threw 1 inning. I think he ended up giving a run and 3 hits in that 1 inning. He did get some bad luck on batted balls, but that's fine. That's not what I'm here to talk about. Is Jack Patterson's outcomes. I'm here to talk about the fact that Jack Patterson was back on the mound for Myrtle Beach. Basically, let me give you a rundown of Jack Patterson's story and how he got here, because we kind of chronicled it at the last show that we did. Me and Jimmy Nelligan recorded the Growing Cubs podcast over for Cubs Insider for a few years. One of the guys we interviewed as a player interview was Jack Patterson. And we didn't know his story in college before we had him on the show. And then he talked about it, and we were so blown away by the story that I ended up writing a long form article about it at Cubs Insider. So go check that out. Just type in Cubs Insider Jack Patterson, and it has the story, the rundown, but I'll give it to you here too. So Jack Patterson in college, he went to Bryant University in his freshman year there at Bryant's. During a practice, he was shagging balls in the outfield. And when he was shagging balls in the outfield, he's behind one of those like nets, right? So the batting practice is happening. Players are throwing the balls to him just behind second base so that he can kind of put the balls in the bucket and then return them to the batting practice pitcher. The screen that he was behind was not quite tall enough. A batter taking batting practice hit like a top spin line drive, and it ended up hitting Jack Patterson in the back of the head. He ended up going down, blacked out for a little bit, obviously got a really bad concussion, and ended up missing a significant amount of time because of the concussion right off the bat. When he tried to return, he struggled, and he dealt with a lot of concussion, post-concussion syndrome conditions. And in doing that, he really had really bad migraines. He dealt with anxiety and depression really bad. So he came back to the program. He was cleared by doctors, but he just wasn't really right. He wasn't really ready to come back his sophomore year. And after communicating with his coaches, with his manager and his pitching coach, they decided to he decided to step away from the baseball program. And in doing that, he ended up the coaches wanted to kind of figure out a way to keep him. He didn't have to continue pitching, but they wanted to keep him on scholarship and keep him around the program. Jack, the nice dude that he is, decided, hey, I don't want to take this scholarship away and have his scholarship dispersed to other guys on the team, which is like great guy. So, but Jack's played baseball his whole life, so he wanted to stick around the team. He ended up working as like a student worker around the ballpark to just kind of stay around baseball a little bit. And when he was around the team that much, he wanted to come back. He had the itch to come back. He ended up coming back. His freshman year was the 2014 season. He ended up coming back and pitching strong the 2017 and 2018 season after dealing with those anxiety and depression issues that he had from the concussion. He came back in 2017, 2018, pitched really, really well. When he came back, he was strong enough to be drafted. He was a 32nd round draft pick, a draft round that does not exist anymore in today's draft. It only goes 20 rounds. So he's a 32nd round draft pick by the Cubs in the 2018 draft. He went up to at the time, it was Eugene short season ball to finish off that 2018 campaign. And then when the 2019 season started, he was as a college senior. Typically, you would see a guy that's a college senior coming off his draft year assigned to a full season affiliate, at least the low A level. Sometimes you'll see those guys like Will Sanders assigned to the high A level after his draft year. Jack Patterson was not assigned to a full season affiliate out of spring training. So he ended up spending more time down in Mesa, down in extended spring training. During his time there, he got to throw multiple bullpens. He had to throw multiple bullpens. He kind of got to perfect his craft. There, he transitioned from being a wind-up guy to a working strictly out of the stretch type of guy, which was super fun. And he did well enough in extended spring training that he got sent to single A to low A, which at the time was South Bend. He worked out of the bullpen in South Bend. This is 2019, remember. He worked out of the bullpen and was strong enough that he got the call up to Myrtle Beach, where he started starting more often. He worked as a starting pitcher in high A Myrtle Beach at the time. And then because he was so strong and putting up such great results at that level, he got bumped up again and spent an end of the season being an extended spring training to single A to high A and into the season in double A Tennessee, where he again was really, really strong. So just an incredible season from Jack Patterson in 2019, really put himself on the map in a lot of ways. As we know, the 2020 season there was no minor league season in 2020 because of COVID. So that was kind of tough. He didn't get to kind of parlay that success in 2019 into success on the field in 2020 as well. He was assigned to the alternate site, which was if there's injuries or a guy struggling at the major league level, all the guys at the alt site that happened to be in South Bend were just a call away. They were scrimmaging each other more or less and ready to be called up to the major league. So he was part of that small group of guys that was just a call away from the major leagues. He was so close to making his major league debut. He did not make his debut in 2020. Okay, so flash forward now to 2021. He unfortunately goes down with Tommy John surgery. It's rough. He ends up missing the entire 2021 season. That happens with pitchers, especially nowadays. He ended up missing that entire 2021 season. He came back in 2022. This is now, I guess, 2 years ago. He came back in 2022, and he was making his final rehab appearance in his return from Tommy John surgery. In doing that, in making that last appearance, he felt a tweak in his elbow yet again. Unfortunately, he went down with Tommy John surgery for a second time in 2 years. So that second battle back from Tommy John surgery was a much longer and much more winding process to get back to the field after his second Tommy John than his first. So that happened in 2022. He missed the rest of the 2022 season, and through that rehab process, missed the rest of the 2023 season. So now we're looking in 2024 at a guy in Jack Patterson that is a 28-year-old prospect. He hasn't thrown in a minor league game since 2019. He's missed. Back in college, he missed a year and a half with that concussion, with those concussion-like symptoms. He's missed a lot of time away from baseball over the course of his playing days. He came back. This is where we saw him last night. He cracked the opening day roster for the Myrtle Beach Pelicans. That was super, super exciting. He pitched on Sunday night. He got to throw on the mound. I can't imagine he got to strike a guy out. I can't imagine the weight that was lifted off his shoulders and coming back and that long, both the physical toll and the mental toll it takes on a guy to be away from the game for that long, not throwing in games and battle his way back. So, in my opinion, Jack Patterson could struggle the entire year in terms of his results on the mound, and it would still be a miraculous comeback that we've seen from him. I think that there's every reason for Jack Patterson to be every single person's favorite prospect this year, and the guy we're rooting for the hardest to make his climb up to the system. So I would imagine with him being 28, nearly 29 years old, I think he turns 29 this summer. I'd imagine that they're gonna, as he kind of performs and as he gets more comfortable, he will continue to rise up to the system from single A up to high A South Bend, up to double A Tennessee, and then ultimately up to triple A, hopefully in the major leagues. So I'm rooting for Jack Patterson. Like I said, I know that I wanted to kind of hit on Jack Patterson last. He's a great dude. We should all root for Jack Patterson. And I think that in this amazing first weekend of minor league prospect action, to see Jack Patterson that kind of puts a nice touch to finish off this episode. So I'll leave that here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in live on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, listening on podcast or on YouTube the next day. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And we'll keep this going all season long. We'll keep producing episodes every week. I'll be back next week with I believe it's Brian next week, but I will have a co-host. It won't just be me talking for an hour and 15. I can't believe I just did that. It won't be me talking for an hour and 15 minutes just at you. I'll have a little bit of conversation to have. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll be back in your ears in just one short week. Thanks, guys. Yo.